Hello and welcome to Sake Revolution, America's first sake podcast. I am your host, John Puma from the SakeNotes.com. I'm also the administrator of the Internet Sake Discord and an all-around sake nerd, just like you.
And I'm your host, Timothy Sullivan. I'm a sake samurai, sake educator, as well as the founder of the Urban Sake website. And together, John and I will be tasting and chatting about all things sake and doing our very best to make it fun and easy to understand. So, John, every week when we start, you mention that you're the administrator of the Internet Sake Discord. Now, I know a little bit about computers, but honestly, before you actually told me, I had no idea what a Discord was. So maybe for our listeners who are in the same boat, could you describe a little bit about what this Discord thing is?
Sure. So a Discord is it's basically just a chat room. It's a service that was made originally for video gaming, for people playing games to get together and chat about stuff in text and voice and video and then play their games together. However, it's also become much more commonly used for just any kind of topic, not just video game stuff. Now, I am also the administrator of the sake subreddit on Reddit, and I thought at one point that it would make a lot of sense for us to have a Discord chat to go with it so that people that were posting there can go and get together and make a little community and chit-chat about sake, and that's exactly what happened.
All right, so Discord's kind of like a alternative to Zoom, right? It's like a place where you can see each other and chat and talk to each other?
Sort of. It's a little bit more text focused. It's a little bit more about typing to each other, but then there's audio rooms that you can go into and speak. For the most part, what we do is mostly just chatting about sake, sending pictures back and forth of things we're drinking. It's honestly a lot like a throwback to the old days of like internet relay chat, IRC, and like actually maybe like AOL chat rooms in a way.
Like a message board kind of thing?
Sort of, yeah.
Oh, wow. Well, if someone's interested in getting onto the Sake Discord, what's the best way to get there?
Well, we are going to have an invite link in our show notes, and there's also a permanent link that's always up at the Reddit sake subreddit. So that's reddit.com/sake, and just look for that Internet Sake Discord post at the top.
And it's also an app, right? So it's something you have to download to your phone or your computer.
Yes, it's an app that you can access on any computer or mobile device.
Cool. Well, I hope some people check it out. I had fun chatting on the Sake Discord, and I think it's something really cool that maybe a lot of people don't know about. So check it out.
Great. This was my moment of self-promotion. This was fun.
We all get one, don't we?
This is nice. Yeah. So this week, Tim.
Yes.
We get to promote what you're up to. We are going to be going back into the Sake Education Corner.
Yes.
And the Sake Education Corner will continue to bring us on our journey through the making of sake.
Yes. So many steps, but we can see the finish line in the distance. So we're going to be talking about the next step in sake production, and maybe I could give a quick recap to what we've talked about so far.
Please do.
So we started with rice milling, then raw materials processing, which is the rice washing, steaming, and soaking. Then we move on to koji production, that's making that molded rice that breaks down starch into sugar. Then from there, we move on to the shubo, or the sake mother, that's the fermentation starter. And then we move on to moromi, which is the main mash fermentation. That's that 30-day fermentation where we convert all the starches into sugar and then sugar into alcohol. And then we do pressing. And that's when we separate the unfermented rice from the finished alcohol. And you'd think we're done.
Well, I thought we were done when you told me that we could drink that.
In some cases,
then you said,
done.
No, John, there's more steps after this. We can't just drink the pressed sake.
Yes, if you're in a hurry, you can drink out of the press. But for most of us, there's a few more steps involved. And today, we're going to talk about the next step right after pressing, which is pasteurization.
Yes. Now, pasteurization, I think this is going to be an interesting topic because I think it's the only one, well, apart from maybe Shubo, which we learned in that episode, that is somewhat optional.
Yes, it is. It's totally optional. You do not
totally
have to
optional.
pasteurize.
It's common, but it's sometimes it is optional.
Yeah. When you finish with pressing, a lot of the things you do are, you can do them many different ways to create different kinds of sake, and pasteurization falls right into that category. In Japanese, it's called hi-ire,
Hi-ire.
H-I-I-R-E, hi-ire, which
All right.
means put into the fire, put into the heat, or put into the fire.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this actually will help me understand some things that I've Google translated in the past.
Yes. Yeah, so as most people I'm sure know, pasteurization is heat treating of something to make it shelf stable outside of refrigeration. So in the case of sake, we heat the liquid to a point where the enzymes get deactivated and the bacteria and any yeast that's still active all dies, and it makes it stable and keeps it from spoiling outside of refrigeration. So we basically kill off any living thing that's still in there.
Great. And now, if I'm not mistaken, we've got a couple of ways that we can do this.
Yes, there's 4 variations when it comes to pasteurization. I don't know if you remember a few episodes I talked about Banryu, the 10,000 ways of doing things.
Yes.
Well, we got 4 more right here.
When we start talking about Banryu and the 10,000 ways, I thought that the sake creation series was going to be a lot longer than I originally anticipated.
Well, we
are at episode 10,000.
We're going to be in the nursing home with that when we get to that final
exactly
10,001st way to make sake.
But luckily, here we only have 4.
Yes. Today we only have to deal with 4. And one of them we've already talked about. So it's really only 3 new things we have to talk about. The first one is skipping pasteurization altogether. And you know what that is called, right?
That's nama. That's the raw stuff.
That's right. So if you skip pasteurization, that's called nama. Nama literally means raw, and it's just fully unpasteurized sake. And then there's another option, and to understand the next 3 options, it's worthwhile to understand the process from this point. So after pressing, we take the sake that's been pressed, and that goes into, in most cases, goes into storage phase for 6 months. That's called chozo. So chozo is the word for storage. So most sake is pressed, stored, and then bottled. Okay? So think of those 3 stops along the way. So you have the pressing, then you generally put it in a tank and you store it for 6 months, and then it goes to bottling. Okay, so the normal progression is press, and you pasteurize once, then you store it for 6 months, you pasteurize again, and then you bottle. So there's a pasteurization on either side of that middle storage step, the 6-month lagering step. So that's the second way you can do things. And that's the most common out of any of these, is to pasteurize twice, once at the time of storage and once at the time of bottling. So that keeps the sake very, very secure and prevents any possibility of spoilage, because you're hitting it twice with the pasteurization step.
So 2 fires.
That's right. Yep. And so the first option was skipping both of those pasteurizations, and the second one we talked about was doing both of those pasteurizations. Can you guess what the other 2 options are?
Tim, I'm going to assume that they are going to be introducing the pasteurization on one end or on the other end.
Bingo.
This was...
Yeah.
That was hard.
So there's pasteurization where we skip the first pasteurization before storage and we only pasteurize at the time of bottling. And then the other option is pasteurized before storage, but that second pasteurization before bottling, we skip that one. So these are considered like half nama. They're only pasteurized once, so it's like Nama Light.
Nama Light.
Yes.
Okay.
So
All
let me
right.
tell you
All
what both
right.
of those are called. So remember I said that storage step, that's called
Right.
chozo, right?
Yeah.
So if you skip the first pasteurization and you go into that chozo or storage step as Nama, that step is called Nama chozo. So Nama chozo is once pasteurized, but only after storage. So that literally means stored as a Nama chozo. And then the other option is Nama zume. That's pasteurized once before storage, stored as a pasteurized product, and then not pasteurized a second time when you go into the bottling step.
Interesting. So, out of curiosity, then, with Nama zume, if you're pasteurizing it at that beginning step and killing off all of the extraneous living yeast, bacteria, anything else that's in there, and then letting it mature, and then you're bottling it. If everything's already been slain, what are we doing? What is the purpose of? I guess the broader question that I have is, what's the purpose of the second pasteurization?
Yeah. Well, when the sake is sitting around for 6 long months, and it's going through new tubes and on its way through the bottling equipment, there is a chance for some microorganism to get introduced. It's a small chance, but depending on how the sake is stored during those 6 months, if it's stored at room temperature, if it's stored in a refrigerated environment, there's all these different factors. So when you have sake sitting around for 6 months, there is a chance for microbes to be introduced in some way. And out of an abundance of caution, the industry practice is to pasteurize, hit it one more time right when it goes into the bottle. And that will doubly ensure that the sake is completely free of any active enzymes or any living organisms.
All right. Okay. That's interesting. And obviously, I think the Nama chozo kind of speaks for itself and what makes it interesting, because you're having the live stuff hang around for that maturation stage, and then you're stopping the growth at that point. So you have that whole stage where things are changing, things are moving potentially.
Yeah.
And that's interesting.
Yeah, and that's actually Nama. We sometimes call it Nama, the pure Nama, because there's actually those two pasteurizations. So Nama or whole Nama is the most dangerous, because your sake is not protected in any way from the microorganism. You have to control that with temperature. It has to be refrigerated all the time. A Nama chozo, where you store it as a Nama and then pasteurize it only once as it goes into the bottle, that's the second most dangerous option, because you have those 6 months it's sitting out as an unpasteurized product. And you have to be very, very cautious and careful keeping that temperature controlled so that bacteria or any microorganisms can't develop. So that's the second most risky one. The third most risky one is the Nama zume, where you're pasteurizing it right out of the press, but you don't hit it again before bottling. And then the double pasteurization is the industry standard, and that's the most common by far, is the double pasteurization.
Right. I would say that if you don't see the word Nama anywhere on your sake, chances are it's been double pasteurized.
Exactly. And if you do see Nama on the label or the bottle, it can be any one of those three we talked about. It can be Nama, it can be Nama chozo, or it can be Nama zume. And sometimes they call out if it's Nama chozo or Nama zume. You've seen that, right, on some labels?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes in Japanese, sometimes in English, sometimes both.
Yeah. But if you see Nama on the label, the best way as a consumer to handle it is to assume it's a Nama and keep it refrigerated, just out of an abundance of caution. So anything Nama adjacent, I keep it refrigerated for sure.
I think that's a safe bet.
Okay, so let's talk about the 3 ways that you actually can do this pasteurization step. The first one is exposing sake in the bottle to hot water. And you can do this by putting the bottle into a hot water bath, or actually running the bottle along a conveyor belt and it gets a shower of hot water. You want to bring the internal temperature of the sake up to about 150 degrees Fahrenheit. And again, that's going to deactivate the enzymes and kill any microorganisms. So exposing the sake to hot water while it's in the bottle is one way to do it. A second way to pasteurize sake is to run the sake through a pipe that is submerged in hot water. And that will raise the temperature of the sake, will go around and around under the hot water, through the hot water, and then that will achieve the same end, bringing the sake temperature up to about 150 degrees Fahrenheit. And the third method for pasteurizing sake is called heat exchanger.
Heat exchanger.
And the heat exchanger is basically metal plates that have grooves in them, and sake is run through one side of the plate and hot waters run through the other side of the plate, and the metal plate, the liquids never touch, but the metal plate transfers the heat from the hot liquid to the sake. If you ever put a spoon into a cup of tea and let it sit there and you touch the spoon to take it out and the spoon's really, really hot from the hot water, that's the same principle where the metal plate is going to transfer the heat from the hot water to the sake. So that's a heat exchanger method. So those are the three ways, the three production methods that we use for actually heating the sake to pasteurize it.
Thanks for the explanation. I now know what a heat exchanger is. So Tim, we understand like when you have nama, and we've talked about this in a previous episode that was dedicated to nama, what that means as far as what that's going to bring out of your sake from a flavor standpoint. And we know what pasteurization is going to do, but what is nama zume going to do? What kind of impact is that going to have on flavor profile? And then the same question for nama chozo.
Yeah, I think nama chozo and nama zume have one foot in both camps. And I think that anybody who says they can taste the difference between a nama zume and a nama chozo,
You don't know if they're being honest?
I've never met a sake expert who can say they can taste the difference by blind tasting the sake. So I don't think there's a huge, really perceptible difference between nama chozo and nama zume. Between fully unpasteurized and fully pasteurized, yes, you can taste the difference.
Oh, yeah.
But nama zume and nama chozo kind of give you the best of both worlds, and they have one foot in each camp. So one way to look at it, it's a compromise, and you're not going to get that full, vibrant nama juicy flavor, but you don't get the more staid, quiet, more restrained version of the fully pasteurized. So it's a way to have a little one foot in both camps, you know what I mean? So you get a little bit of each style, and it's a nice compromise way of looking at things. And it's just a fun way to get a bit of zippiness without going full unpasteurized. You get a little bit of protection, but you also have a little bit of that zippy, juicy nama flavor.
Interesting. All right.
All right. So, John, I think it's time we move on to some tasting. That's why we're here, right?
I thought you'd never ask.
All right. So, let's, as we always do, let's both introduce our sakes. Why don't you go first and tell us what you've brought to taste today?
So I brought a nama. Nama.
Nama.
This is Fukachu Biho Junmai Ginjo Nama. And it is from Hiroshima. And it is a Genshu, actually, although the alcohol by volume is only about 15.5%. Interestingly, though, this is matured for a lot longer than most sakes. This is actually matured for 18 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
For a fully unpasteurized sake, that's kind of rare.
Yeah. It's a little... it's probably going to be a little bit of a taste adventure, I think. It's probably going to be interesting. It's going to be very exciting to see what happens with that.
I'm excited.
The interesting thing about this sake, apart from the fact that You have a brewery in Hiroshima that is making Junmai Ginjo, and they're known for having very, very soft ore that's going to be hard to work with and hard to make delicate flavors out of. But luckily, one of the only female brewery heads, Miho Imada, runs that place and is able to do really interesting stuff with sake. And that's what I have. Tim, what did you bring?
Well, I brought an American sake. I got my hands on a new release from Brooklyn Kura, which is our local Brooklyn sake brewery. This is their Catskills Junmai Daiginjo, and this is sold as a Nama Chozo. And now we all know what that means. Nama Chozo means stored as a Nama. So that means this was pasteurized once, and that would be at the time of bottling, not with any storage previous to bottling. So I'm really excited to taste this. It's a Junmai Daiginjo, 50% rice milling. It uses domestic Yamada Nishiki sake rice, 16% alcohol, and an SMV of -1. All right. So that's what I've got. I'm excited to explore both of these sakes, but since you have the Nama and that's more perishable, why don't you go first?
I don't think a few minutes is going to make a big difference, Tim, but okay.
Well, you can never be too careful.
Having said that, if somebody asks me to have a drink, I'm not going to.
Okay.
Not going to decline. Okay, so wow, this sake has an aroma. Like it is
capital A.
Yes. Oh wow, it is so aromatic. There's so much fruit and green grapes. It is Muscat. Those green grapes is all over, just bursting out. Like this smells juicy in that way that we talked about Nama before. Nama's being very juicy, just having a big flavor. I actually cannot wait to stop talking and start sipping.
Okay.
So I'm going to do that.
Yep.
Yeah. This lives up to the nose completely. It is 100% imbalance. So what you smell causes you to expect it to taste a certain way, and it does that exactly. It is 100% the sake that you expect it to be based on based on its aroma. Like this is wonderful, and it is big, juicy, fruity. A Ginjo lover's Ginjo, and maybe a Nama lover's Nama. I don't know. Maybe it's a little tame for that, though. It's not as wild as some of the Namas I've had.
But it's important to mention that, sometimes you smell a sake and what you get on the taste is very different. Like you're like, is this the same sake?
I think we've had situations on this very show where we've felt that the sake was somewhat out of balance because the aroma that was making a promise that the sip couldn't live up to. And here they are making good on it. This is wonderful, wonderful sake. And for something that's been stored for 18 months, unpasteurized, and then bottled unpasteurized, and then shipped across the world, I am impressed at how focused of purpose the sake seems to be. Wonderful, wonderful stuff.
I can only imagine what it tastes like right out of the press. It must be insane.
I mean, it's got to be. I mean, I imagine that the 18 months is going to mellow it a little bit, right?
Yeah, that's what you would expect.
Right. So, yeah, I can't imagine having this out of the press. Must be just bonkers. This must be a really exciting sake to have that way.
What's the finish like? Does it linger a long time, or is it kind of short? Can you taste it after you finish sipping? Does it stay with you for a long time?
A little bit. It doesn't overstay its welcome, but it's so good that you kind of want it to continue, so you have another sip.
Yeah.
It is one of those sakes, and it is. Yeah, it doesn't overstay its welcome. It doesn't drop off either. It just kind of fades away.
That's good. It sounds really well integrated, like all the different parts.
It is. This is a wonderfully balanced sake. Like it is. I just feel like every stage of it feels very purposeful and very very in control, even though it is on paper, it seems like something that would be wildly out of control.
Well, that's the sign of a true master brewer, maintaining that integrity and that integration on something that's a nama, like unpasteurized, which is one of the hardest things to control. That really speaks to Miho-san's ability as a master brewer. Just fantastic.
Yeah, I did not mention this earlier, but the rice type on this one is Yamada Nishiki, and it is polished down to 50%. But even though it is polished at 50%, I can definitely tell why they chose to call this a ginjo. It is so very Junmai ginjo. All right, I gotta stop exuding my positivity on this and give you a chance to talk for a bit.
All right. Well, let me get my sake out here. I have the Brooklyn Kura Junmai Dai Ginjo Catskills. So I'm going to give this a pour. All right. Let's see here. So one way I judge how aromatic a sake is when do you smell it? Do you smell it when the glass is 8 inches away from your nose, or do you have to put your nose right up to it, or do you actually have to stick your nose into the glass to smell it? And I smelled this the moment I poured it. It had exuberant aroma. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It is lovely, very fruity, but complex. It smells like a nama. I think if I were to, again, this is a nama chozo, so they did pasteurize this as it went into the bottle.
Right.
And normally that quiets the sake down a little bit, but this still has a lot of exuberance. And honestly, one of the differences might be that this came from Brooklyn, about 5 miles away from where I'm sitting, versus another nama chozo all the way from Japan might be a little bit more quiet given the transportation time. But I got this super, super fresh. That's one of the advantages of having a sake brewery in your town. So, John, we're super lucky.
Yes, up until now, it's just been we need to move to Japan if I want to have this experience.
Exactly. So, there's some wonderful melon, honeydew, just these wonderful melon aromas. And tropical fruits too, papaya, a little bit of mango, but there's a rich edge to it, a juicy edge to it. Very, very wonderful aroma. I'm going to give it a taste. So it has some fruitiness on the palate as well, but there's a bright acidity there.
Oh.
And acidity is not something we talk about that much because most sake has a really subdued acidity. But this sake has a brightness to balance the sweeter components that come through with those tropical flavors. And it has a really nice, just a little touch of acidity to balance that out and give you a brightness at the finish. So this one doesn't linger as long on the palate as you might get with a comparable wine flavor. Wine might linger a little bit more. This one has a little bit more of a shorter finish. And I agree with what you said earlier, John, that it leaves you wanting for the next sip. And that's something that I commonly find in sake, that the finishes are perhaps a touch more restrained, and it leaves you ready for the next bite of food or the next sip of sake.
Oh, yeah. Now I just want to sip more of this.
Yeah. So speaking of food, let's talk about some pairing ideas for our sake.
Oof. You go
I know
first.
with namas, it's hard. With namas, it's hard.
It is. Because it's a nama, I want to say bigger flavors. But it's still a Junmai Ginjo. It's like, it's a Junmai Ginjo lover's Ginjo, and it is so fruity. And I feel like I'd be a little worried about introducing stronger dishes to it. So I might stick with the lighter things, stick with the white fish, that sort of thing. I'll start with, maybe some Ooh, yeah. Whitefish sounds really good with this, actually. Maybe some shrimp. Shrimp would be good.
Oh yeah, yeah. I had a. I tend to do this a lot when we talk about this, but I refer to a very specific dish that I just had, and
Okay.
I recently had. We made cod, which is a very classic whitefish,
Absolutely.
but we had it topped with an herb panko crust with lemon zest.
Ooh, that
So it was
sounds really
herbs
good.
and lemon zest, and then it was roasted whitefish cod, and that had the wonderful mellow little bit of umami flavor of whitefish, very mild, a nice texture from the panko, and then it had that hit of lemon zest, and that little touch of acidity reminds me of this sake, and I think that would be a knockout combination, just killer. I'll get you the recipe.
Yeah, could you please?
I'll put it on the internet Discord.
Oh, thank you.
I'll
Sake
post it
Discord.
to the sake Discord. Anyone who wants the cod panko recipe, just visit the sake Discord, and we'll put it up there.
I like
No, we're gonna visit we're gonna visit shit.
Tim, I think you want this to go in the show notes.
So we're gonna put this in the show notes. I'll get that recipe for cod with panko and lemon zest. So good. So now we're hungry.
Yep.
And we're thirsty.
I just ate before we started recording, and I want to eat all over again.
Well, I waited because I knew I was going to get hungry. We always talk about these fantastic food and sake combos. But this sake is absolutely fantastic, and it has really great balance. And, you know, if you had told me 10 years ago that I'd be enjoying domestically made sake so much, I just wouldn't have believed you. It's a brave new world, John.
It is.
It really
It
is.
I'm consistently impressed with what we're able to do these days here in America with sake. It's shocking to me. I think that also when we were, and you have much more of a head start than I do, but when we were first getting into sake, it was a fantasy almost.
I have more of a head start. Is that your polite way of saying I'm a little bit more mature than you are?
All I was saying is you've been drinking sake longer than I have, sir.
Since my elementary school days.
Yeah. No.
No,
I'm just saying that you've been drinking sake longer than I have. I started in 2006, as we've detailed on this very show, and I believe you started like
2005.
No,
2005.
Five?
Yes.
Really?
It was March 2005 was my first premium sake.
Huh. Why did I think you've been drinking it longer? Probably because you started the urban sake site a lot earlier than I did anything. Aha! It's all coming together.
Well, no, I am older. I am older than you are, and that's proof positive that I don't know what an internet sake Discord is. So that's proof that you're younger and hipper. I admit to that for sure.
Younger, I will give you. Hipper, we're splitting hairs.
We've both told too many dad jokes on this podcast to be either one of us too hip, right?
Oh boy.
All right. Well, this was a lot of fun. You know, the one thing that I am a little bit sad about is that because we're not together in the same room, we're doing all these by Zoom now because of social distancing. I can't taste the sakes that you have, and vice versa. So that's a little bit of a downer, but I can't wait to get my hands on that sake you were tasting today.
It is phenomenal. Now, I'm at a somewhat of an advantage because I did taste the sake that you had today just a few weeks ago, and I have not stopped raving about it. So I'm glad you got to experience it too. It's really something special. They're doing some good stuff over there.
Yeah. So since you tasted it as well, would you agree with my tasting note, my comments?
Yeah, I thought that the when you first mentioned that when you were able to get the aroma from a large distance because it was so powerful, I was like, yes, that's exactly, yeah. Because I remember when I first opened it up, I poured it into a wine glass and I was just like, whoa, am I a super sniffer today or what? And realized, no, it is just very, very aromatic.
I think you're a super sniffer every day, John. I believe in you.
This is the nicest thing you've ever said to me.
Well, we both got awesome sakes. I think we both won today.
We did.
There's no losers in Sake Revolution today.
None. Never are. Never are.
Well, thank you all so much for tuning in. We had a lot of fun today. If you can, please take a moment and rate our show on Apple Podcasts.
And to make sure you don't miss any episodes, because we're all very busy, we want you to subscribe. This way, every week, our podcast will magically show up on your device of choice.
And as always, to learn more about any of the topics or sakes or recipes we talked about in today's show, please be sure to visit our show notes. They're at sakerevolution.com.
And as always, if you have a sake question that you need answered, we want to hear from you. Reach out to us at feedback@sakerevolution.com. So until next time, please remember to keep drinking sake and kampai.